Hi, all everyone. It's me again. It's gonna be an impromptu lesson for today. Um, I know I've gone over about the openings and things about nights and days out and stuff like that. Um, Things about queens and stuff. Um, Now the subject I'm gonna be going on about, I kind of left until last because it's very critical. Um, when you start playing chess, you're either going to be having your nose buried deep in a book about chess openings, but once you have your openings memorized, you're going to have your nose buried in books about chess endings. Um, Normally, if you know your opening, you can survive the middle and you can normally get struggle your way to your end. Um, Now, we'll get to a little bit. I'll explain more later, but essentially, um, what I want you to think about now is that with the end game, the rules kind of flip on what you're supposed to do compared to a normal middle or opening game. For example, um, the very last thing that you want to do during the middle game is charge a king up the middle of the board. Um, where in the end game, the king's very important. It's another you can use the king to attack as well as defend. Um, it's very interesting and it gets very complicated. And if you're like me, who's not a fan of maths, then unfortunately, chess is not going to be a game for you because maths is very important. You've got to do counting in your head and you've got to do it without pointing to the board. Um, Alright, so let's get underway and let's do it. First, we'll do a tournament update because I haven't done one in a while. Mainly because the people that are remaining are slowing their groups down, and it's extremely annoying, but there's nothing we can do but let the time run out. So, okay. First of all, we got a bit of good news, bad news for Verdict, unfortunately. Congratulations on your fifth win, but unfortunately, he now can no longer reach the top three. He can only get 11 points. This guy has beaten him by point 0.5. With the remaining games, if he won every single one of them, he would only get 11. This guy has 11.5. So unfortunately, that rules him out. But this was his first tournament, so he'll definitely be back. Um, I personally, for someone who was helping him and trying to get him to play better, he blew my expectations away. I expected him to get like one or two wins and just be like that. But he got five. He got some timeout wins and he got some experience. Mm. And hopefully he had some fun too playing it. It's all about fun, and I see him come a long way. And I also see that his game has improved a lot. The game that I played with him recently in the friendly, he almost beat me. He was 9 moves away. He just unfortunately missed it. So same tournament as Verdict. I'm still technically tied, but I'm ahead because I've got a better average. Um, this guy can only get 15 points. Uh, I can win by getting 16. I'm waiting for this guy, the Frenchie, and this guy too. So we'll see what's going on. Um, Now with the other tournaments under 1400, that group still waiting for this guy to get his ass off the bench and stop holding up the group because he hasn't been playing. He's holding up everyone else. Um, the knockout. This one is so far so good. I'm doing my normal opening and attack and stuff like that, so I have expectations, but that's still new. This one is getting a little bit interesting. Um, Only one person can advance from the group. Now, if I win every game I have left, I beat the Russian. Uh, so that's coming down. And I'm going to be starting another tournament, a knockout, 1st of October. Hopefully, this is going to be a quick one. It's a 1 day tournament. No vacation allowed, 1 day tournament. Alright, before. So let's get on to the subject of. Um, the subject of end games. What I would like you to do is set this. If you have a chessboard, or if you have somewhere that you can study this, um, this is a puzzle that I want you to try and solve. This is one that will help you prepare. And it was because of this, literally this exercise that I did, that helped me in the very last game I played live on chess.com. I had a similar scenario where I had to stop the pawn from being promoted, otherwise the game's going to be drawn. So, with this puzzle, you are black, and it's black to move. You will note it looks like the pawns on c2 and the king and queen are on the black way, but if you notice, the king and queen are on the wrong color. Also, the notation is should help you realize that no, the board's flipped. It is important to play this from the black's point of view because it adds to the difficulty. If you play it from white, it's just too easy. Um, so the scenario is white is on the verge of promoting this pawn to a queen. If white gets a queen, the game's going to be a draw. You'll end up exchanging queens, um, and then it'll be insufficient material draw. But black can win this. Um, you've you just gotta know how to. You gotta know how to do this. There's many analogies to end games. You can think of it as the NFL, blockers, linebackers, and all that. There's tons of scenarios. With the end game, it is important not to panic. You've done all of the hard work up until now. Um, you've got to just keep straight. Don't rush into it and look and think. And you have to look at all the squares. Now, this is where the hard part comes in because you're looking at empty squares. You're not looking where the board is with full of pieces during the middle game. You've got to be aware of each and every single square each piece can go to at every single time to stop you from being surprised by a knight forking your king and rook or your king and queen. Um, it comes down to where you've only got a few pawns and a king and maybe a piece, and you've got to play perfectly. Um, the end game of chess is the guerrilla warfare, hand-to-hand combat of the chess world. It's down and dirty. No one is your friend. You've just got to kill for the sake of kill. Like, you've got to think of blood and nothing but blood. Um, you've got to decide quickly which side of the board your king you want it to be on, and that's important because once you decide to keep your king on that one side, you've got to try and keep it there unless you have a bloody good reason to get the king on the other side of the board. I mean, if you had a king on h7 and a pawn on a2, do you think your king can get over in time before it gets to a8? That's the sort of stuff you got to work out. You got to make sure that when you make a move, you leave enough time to um, get where the king needs to before the opposition has an advantage. Those math questions, like if the train leaves at 10 past 2 and you wanted to catch the train at London at 4 p.m., how much time would you need to get from here to London? That sort of stuff applies to chess. Um, it's if you're good with mathematics, you won't have a problem. It'll be more easier. Okay, so keep this puzzle. I will post it on Twitter. And then also, what I would like you to do is just try this out, and then I will either set up a friendly game with Verdict as me as white and him as black, and see if he can do it against me. And if he does, um, I'll use that video as the answer for my next video. Um, okay, so over to here, back onto Battle Chess. So there is tons and tons of different scenarios to practice with. This is a good classic one. 3 pawns and a king versus 3 pawns and a king. Who should win? Who shouldn't win? Well, it's right to move. Um, this is a good example of just how to start practicing the end game. You don't want to overload yourself. But going up against pawns is can be tricky, and you need to know what to do. Um, your your aim is to get a pawn past their pawn and their king to get to a queen. If you're not careful, black will get a pawn past your pawns and your king, and you can't stop him in time. And it either ends up in a draw or a win or a loss, depending how you win. There's very little margin for error here. Um, the end game is extremely critical and very unforgiving because your opponent wants to win. That's what I mean by the guerrilla warfare. The opponent is out for guts. He doesn't want to draw. He wants to kill you, or she wants to kill you. It's not pleasant at all. So you can try. Let's see. Well, black sees. Well, these pawns haven't moved yet, so these pawns can move up twice. So black moves up, thinking, well, if he takes, I have white has double pawns, and my king can protect that square, and then these 2 pawns can beat up that guy. Easy, right? But the only problem is white doesn't have to take. Now suddenly, black has white has 2 pawns, bypassed one black pawn. The only thing to worry about is now the king can't go to these 2 squares. Black's king can't go to this square or this square. So if black's next move, now it may be tempting to push your pawn up here, but you don't want to do it until you have to. Sometimes it's about delaying the game, what's called delaying moves, because if you push one of these 2 pawns forward now, white's position becomes extremely untenable. Um, like if you push this pawn up, this pawn takes, and then when this pawn recaptures, black's king goes in the middle, and you've lost that pawn. And black has 2 pawns either side of the king down the middle. Again, black wins. So a delay move is just like moving the king up to reinforce. Now, black can either try going for this pawn because it's now unprotected, but it would take 1, 2, 3 moves to get to this pawn, and by which time these two pawns would have got past and got home. So maybe black tries something like this. Now, you got to be careful here. If white takes that pawn, black takes, and then this king can't get to that square, and then black has the time to get round to this pawn. So white goes up and checks. It's not so simple, is it? White's king can't go to that square anymore. And black goes here. Now, where the king has to stay connected to that pawn, so white has to go here. Black goes here. And oh look, black has a passed pawn now. The king can't go to any of the squares to protect that pawn anymore. The king has to move. He'll move here just to stop that pawn. And king takes pawn. So the correct answer when the 3 pawns are up compared to ones that haven't moved, it should be the ones that haven't moved that get passed because you have the extra time. So now white has to try and defend those pawns and block that pawn coming forward at the same time. Um, White can't go here. Black can't move the king here or here, so the king goes forward. Now the king goes forward like this. Black's got to be careful too, because now if the pawn goes forward, king comes back here. King forward. If the king goes here to attack the pawn, forward. Now what's he going to do? Go after his pawns, I guess? And as you can see, white's out of time. This pawn's home. And that becomes queen and check. And it won't be long before and it's not hard to mop that up. King has to move. He's going to try and get a. Well, anyway, that's that. So that's how you get past 3 pawns versus 3 pawns. Now, if we try again on a sip, yeah, I'm sure. Now, the classic one that most people have you practice during the end game is a pawn versus a king versus pawn. And depending what your moves are, you either draw the game or you either win the game. Black has to play it perfectly. So, if nothing else on the board, you have to decide. You have to play this right perfectly. So, white to move, king forward. Black has no option but just keep going backwards and forwards. Well, yeah. Pawn forward check. Hang on. Well, pawn forward check, king goes here. And if king goes here, that would be a draw. So, you've got to practice and practice and practice and practice and practice and practice. Um, Same position, same pieces, but just this time is on the side. Pawn forward check, king there, and then that would be a draw. But you can force it. Well, anyway, so if you're new to end games, here's some of the ground rules that you have to abide by. Now, this is more likely what you're going to come across. Um, Alright, so when you start, this is like a typical end game. You got 3 pieces on one side versus 2, where he has the same on the opposite side. So you've got to decide. Forget that. You got to decide which way or which side you want the king on, and which side you want to defend with your rook. The reason why you have to decide is because if you don't, they will. What I mean by that is, um, s- say my move was white's move. I put my king there. Like I struggle. I thought about okay, just for an example, king goes to f3. I want to protect those pawns, but then he comes out and does this, and I'm like, oh no, maybe I want to protect these pawns because he's going to use their work to come here. So if I go here to bring the king over, rook here, and black has basically cut the board in half, and now you're out of time to get back to where you need to be with those three pawns. But of course, I mean, don't take this seriously because rook takes pawn check, and it's just bad here. Um, but you've got to decide which side of the board your king is wanting to, and stick to it like glue. Stick with the pawns. They are not going anywhere unless your king is forced away from them. As a rule of thumb, I would normally keep the king with the two pawns, not three pawns, because they're weaker, and you want to use your strong piece to attack if you can, as well as defend. Um, so that's one other rule of thumb. You do want to get your king up into the middle of the board. It's not something that you want to keep your king safe. There's no place for your king to hide anymore. There's no bishops. Um, there's no knights. Well, there may be a knight or two, but there you go. Um, Also, practice your mates. I really can't say this enough. Um, if you don't know how to mate, you could end up losing a one game. Like if oh, could you mate with this king and two bishops? It's extremely hard, but yes, you can. Can you mate with knight and bishop? Can you mate with two knights? Do you know how to mate with king and rook? Practice every single one of these. I'm not kidding because your life on the chessboard depends on it. Um, and also playing the end game is actually going to help you play the middle game more because as you're learning to count and watching the squares, you're actually teaching yourself how to predict where your moves are. You, without actually seeing the pieces, you actually are telling your mind, my king's got to get to the square over there in 8 moves. Can I get there? Yes, I can get there within 6 moves. And without realizing it, you're predicting where your king's going to be and where they're going to be, and you're doing and actually teaching yourself how to predict 6 moves ahead, like I do, or as many as you can. Um, Now let's see. Is there anything else I can teach you? I mean, I can't really overstate or understate how important the end game is. You can literally steal a win or force a win from a lost game just by knowing how to play the end game. Um, and if they don't or they make one mistake, that's all it takes. You've played. It's really frustrating and it's heartbreaking during the end game because a, you probably played a really hard long game up until that point, and to let something slip like that, it's really frustrating. Um, like classic one, I should say. Da, da. Ugh, I hate this. Alright, so black just moved the knight to c6, attacking your attacking your rook. Um, you as you don't want to get taken, so you go ahead and hang on. So king, that's right, yeah. So you're looking, well, I don't want to get it taken, so I'm gonna go ahead and put it back here. And then you go ahead and see, uh-oh, and there you go, it's a draw. Insufficient material. I mean, just an easy slip like that, especially under time pressure, it's all it takes. Um, the only thing I can suggest you do is practice, 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 practice. Um, so what I want you um, think of this as homework as well as that puzzle. It's like a little side game. This, but this isn't real chess. Well, it is, but it's different. Um, King versus king with full pawns. First pawn to the end wins, and then play a couple of games like this, and you'll really start to get used to playing the end games. And then you can slowly start adding pieces. Start with a bishop, then a knight, then you can add the rook, and then if you really want to, you can add the queen, but that's kind of pointless. Um, Alright, so that's that. And now, like I said, that particular this puzzle that you're going to teach, um, that one I actually played and done practice so many times actually paid off because it actually helped me. Um, so this will give you a hint of what you're supposed to do on that puzzle. E4, E5. I mean, really, no one played any bad moves, probably questionable moves. Is just that um, no one could force a win, and it was slowly piece for piece. Oh yeah, that's the other thing. Now with an end game, if you're up, like if you have more pawns than pieces, you want to try and exchange. You want to try and take off their pieces while keeping your pawn advantage, and vice versa. If you have more pieces than they have pawns, you want to get rid of the pawns while keeping your pieces. Alright. Alright, so this is what I would qualify as the end game. All the main pieces are off the board except a couple of pieces, and yeah, he has rooks. This doesn't look right now for white. Things look grim, but it's not bad. He recaptures the knight. So the only difference is black has an extra rook. Um, this is where you need to. Normally, the points on the game of pieces taken really don't matter in the game. Uh, Up until this point, this is where it starts to matter because you need to count and keep counting. Um, so he's got 5, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. I got 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Um, on pawns were exactly even. I have 4 pawns on this side. He has 4 pawns on this side. 2 and 2. All right, so black goes here. I know some of you may think that was like, why did you exchange? You already walk down. Um, but that was a calculated move that I knew I could force my way home to get in a queen. See, this is where I already knew the king was going to go after these pawns. Normally, you protect that pawn. Um, but these pawns can handle themselves because there's 4 pawns together connected. The exception to this is the pawn on the end is straggling. If this pawn, if the pawn on the end isn't up higher towards the end of the board, it's going to need protecting. It's a loose end. So king goes up this way, and that also closes off the king coming through to go after that pawn and protects this pawn at the same time. Now you've also got to keep in mind that this bishop is blocking off the white square, so I got to be careful with that too. I got to make sure my pieces, except for the white for the knight, stay on black pieces. Um, the knight is the only piece that is going to land on a white square because it's on a black square. Whatever color square the knight is on means it's going to land on the opposite colored square every single time. So he goes with the knight. You gotta look where the knight rook or the piece can go. Um, one he left that behind, which means the pawn could go forward now. But this he could come down here, check, um, supported by the pawn, and given check, and he could either win the pawn or force my king away for him to be able to take that pawn, which would be dangerous. If he took that pawn, he wouldn't be able to stop this pawn getting home. But I stopped that by putting my knight here to actually stop the preemptive work move. This is where you learn how to predict how and where people are going to move. So he does the next best thing, go after the pawn. That was kind of a bad move, but I wanted a ways to move here because my initial plan is to get my knight to this square here. Because you've got to look at the situation. My pawn is only 2 squares away from becoming a queen. If that king comes 1 square closer to us, that pawn is home. It can't stop it. So he takes the pawn. So I put my knight here. And he takes that pawn. Now this is looking very, very scary. I was very worried about this because it's 4 pawns against one little pawn down here. My king needs to get over to that side. But I can't because the rook is trapped, blocking the entire half of that board over. In fact, that's all he needed to do really to win is just put the rook down to e1 and the pawns come charging home. Game over. But my immediate move is pawn up. Now, if the king goes up to protect that square, I get the rook. Now, if I get the rook, can my king get back to this pawn before? No, yes, it can, because if it goes here, pawn takes. Rook there. Knight takes rook. King takes pawn. It had to. It just had to. Now my knight is there. Now my king comes towards those pawns. Yeah, after I go for the check. I wanted him. I wanted to control this square. Now it's starting to look and scary. But nope, my king can get there in time. Pawn. Pawn takes. What he really should have done here is push the pawn forward, because my king can't get to there in time. Here it can. Like pawn take, like pawn forward, king forward, d foot. I'm one move away. But because he didn't, he took the pawn. Now I have time to get there. See, it's no joke. Just one move can change the entire dynamic of the endgame. And that threat's taken care of. Here comes the other two pawns. I get rid of that one pawn. I want to try and keep my pawns, because if you end up running out of pawns, it's a draw. Because as soon as I take his pawns, and if he takes mine, no one can win. Also, if you don't, in time control games, if you say black here takes all of my pawns, but if he lost, it would be a draw because I have insufficient material to win. So, okay, so here comes the knight. And yeah, nothing's going to happen with those two pawns. He has to defend that pawn. He's trying to go after my little pawn down here. And that, exactly what I was saying before. You have to be careful of knights. And this is why. And here he should have just gone after and take my pawn. Because if he... Because king takes pawn, knight takes bishop, king comes back and attacking that knight, then he gets the other pawn, and then it would have been a draw. But he was too busy trying to win. So king takes pawn, knight takes bishop, king here. There's no way for me to protect that pawn. It's a draw. And I got to be careful because I cannot take this pawn first. If I move my king here, this pawn always gets one step ahead of the king. I mean, he should have gone for the draw. But as it is, I have, white has the chance of winning. So does black technically, but his chances are over. And then that's it, because this pawn's going to get to that end before it comes down here. I've got 3 squares to go compared to his 4. Again, maths, you've got to count the squares, the empty squares. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Obviously, my pawn's going to get home before his. And then it comes all about stopping that pawn from becoming a queen, otherwise it would be a draw. Hello, just like that puzzle. So check. Check. Now I got 50 moves without... you got 50 moves without moving a pawn or taking a piece before it's an automatic draw. Check. Gotta just keep checking him. Keep checking him until he does what I want him to do. Check, 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 check. He's been stubborn. I wanted him to put the king into the corner. Now, if he moved the king away, I would have got the pawn. Now, here I messed up, kind of. I should have just put the king to queen to g3 here, and it would have done it straight away, but I missed it. Queen there, but no worries. And now, king takes, and do the maths. How many squares? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Oh dear. And that's checkmate. It's all about knowing the end game. Knowing your maths, knowing how to count, looking out for the entire board, learning to predict, learning to know which side to keep your king on, and when to change. Keep it in the middle, the king in the middle if you can, because it's going to be strong there. But as long as it's connected to the pawns, that's just how it always is. Okay, so I was asked to explain how to set up conditional moves. Because there's one game, this particular game, it's been like 13 days now that I haven't had to make a move because I've set up conditional moves. He's done absolutely everything I predicted and set up conditional moves. And he's got 2 lines. I got 2 lines left with 2 separate moves. So to show you, I don't think. I'll do it on this one. So this is one of my games. This is how to set up conditional moves. You click on here, and then you've got to predict. You got to try and predict what they're going to do. Now this is, you've got to think of their best potential move against your own move. Now I played d4, so I think he's going to do this. So my next move is going to be knight here. And bishop here. I'm gonna go here. He's gonna put the bishop here. Probably not. And bishop here. So that's 6 moves right there. That's one possible. That's one possible variation that he could do. He could do knight to e7 first, and I go knight f3. He does knight c6, and then he tries to do fianchetto, and I come here, put the bishop there. He puts the bishop here. I go ahead and put the bishop there. He goes ahead and castles, and that's one line right there. So that's how you set it up. You click out, and that's done. Now these moves only happen if black responds in the way that I think he would, but he's probably not going to do any of those because he's not that good. That is conditional moves. Also, don't forget that this analyze button allows you to move pieces around. It allows you to analyze the board and do whatever you want with the bit. You can do this, you can do this, you can do that, as long as it's legal, and you know, mess things around. So when you come back to your daily game, you can analyze the position if you really need to. It's kind of a crutch for those who can't see 12 moves ahead. Um, Alright, so before I end the video, my latest games of showing you why you should never, ever, 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 ever play the Fianchetto unless you play perfect. And I mean perfect. You cannot make a single move, make a single mistake when you're playing the Fianchetto opening. Remember, it's a defensive opening, not an aggressive opening. That's why it has defense twice in the title. So, so here's the first one that I posted on Twitch. And then the next one. And the next one. And the next one. Oh, no, big one. There you go. Alright. I'm not saying that the Fianchetto isn't a good opening, but it is one that has been studied and played the most, that everyone knows the defense against and how to play it against. I do realize that there was an article on the front page of chess.com about it because they're trying to teach you how to play it right. Um, it's an opening you cannot get one because everyone's played it themselves. They know how to beat it. So as soon as you play it against them, they know how to beat you, and you will get destroyed. Alright, so that's it. We started to learn a little bit about the end game. We also did conditional moves, update to the tournaments, and a reminder why you don't do the Fianchetto. Alright, I'll get this uploaded. See you soon.